He's a former British Army commander in Afghanistan and a former chair of the Cobra Intelligence Group as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Colonel.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
In terms, just first of all, going back over the weekend, in terms of the retaliation we saw from Iran for the attack by believed to be Israel, they've not claimed it on the record, on the consulate in Syria and Damascus, where we saw a Revolutionary Guard, senior generals and other military figures taken out. Were you expecting an assault on such a scale from Iran in retaliation? They gave us warning they were going to retaliate. We knew they would retaliate. But this was against civilian targets as well as military targets. It was unprecedented in its scale, 101 drones and ballistic missiles. It is only a matter of, well, luck and thank God for the help of the Iron Dome and indeed the help of British, American, French and Jordanian military help that we didn't see mass loss of life in Israel. Was the scale of the Iranian attack expected?
I think this exceeds any other similar kind of retaliatory attacks that Iran or its proxies have carried out in relation to a specific incident. So, no, I don't think it was necessarily expected on this scale. Of course, it was telegraphed well ahead that something like this would happen. But I think it demonstrates, to an extent, it demonstrates Iran's focus on Israel. Iran has vowed to destroy Israel, to annihilate it, and it set up a ring of steel, of proxies, a ring of fire, as it calls it, of proxies around Israel to do exactly that, including, of course, Hamas, which carried out the attacks on the 7th of October. So Iran is obsessed with Israel, and in some respects, it's not surprising that it would pile everything it's got into, well, not necessarily everything it's got, but a significant amount of it into trying to take what it considers to be revenge against the Jewish state.
Well, indeed. I mean, Joe Biden, the US president, after giving that aid and succor to defend Israel, saying this was ironclad, the support from the West and the US in particular, in the event of defending Israeli territory, but made it clear we will not help you in any offensive war against Iran. He said, Israel should take the win. We didn't see, was any loss of life. The Iron Dome worked. They had support from the allies. They should, quote, take the win. Is that what we should have told the US after 9/11? Is that what we would expect in the UK after, 7/7 and the like? Is it reasonable to expect that Israel should not exact some sort of retaliation, or some people are using the term revenge?
Yeah, and I don't remember Biden telling Ukraine once the initial assault of the Russians had been repelled, okay, we'll take the win now and don't do anything else. Just let's leave it. No, there was nothing like that. This was a unique situation. Israel is expected to tolerate attacks on it where other countries are not. And Biden, of course, has a degree of culpability. This is a totally Iranian culpability, but Biden does have a degree of culpability for this because he has been consistently appeasing and bowing to Iran since he became president of the United States. He's released billions of dollars of frozen assets to Iran, which have been used, among other things, to develop their nuclear program and also to fund violence from its proxies around the region. He's allowed Iran even to carry out attacks against US forces with relatively minimal response. And of course, the more you do that, the more weakness you show, the more you provoke your enemies into attacking. And that's what happened now. If Biden had stood up much more strongly against Iran, as Trump did during his presidency, then I don't think we'd have seen this attack taking place, and we probably wouldn't have even seen the 7th of October attack taking place.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's actually, America, certainly this happened massively under Obama as well. The red line in Syria, the chemical attack, that red line was crossed. Nothing happened as a result. We see not only that vacuum where America doesn't act, it's filled by other players like Russia in the case of Syria, but also that the message went out to our enemies in the West, Russia and others. You can get away with stuff. We're not going to act. We're kind of lily-livered now. And perhaps if Iran had expected a response from the West, and if Russia had expected a strong response from the rest, we wouldn't be in this mess we're in now. But we are in this mess. What would be an appropriate, reasonable response, proportionate response from Israel towards Iran at this current time? What would be acceptable in the in the the halls and meetings at the UN diplomats meeting that in New York, what would be acceptable to them?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that the only people that can decide how to react is the Israeli War Cabinet. They have the information, they have the understanding of the threat, they know what they can do and what they can't do. And it's wrong for us to second guess them, I think. But having said that, I don't think Israel should be looking at a proportionate response. I think Israel should be looking at a disproportionate response here. Israel should deliver a very, very severe retaliatory attack or series of attacks against Iran. And the reason I say that, it sounds terrible, sounds like warmongering. It isn't intended to be that. But it's in this region in particular, only strength is understood. Since Iran carried out this attack over the weekend, it's been ridiculed around the Arab world for being ineffective, for not achieving anything. And that shows the level of contempt that countries around here and players around here have for weakness. So Israel needs to deliver something that will not just be a kind of tit for tat, which will again encourage a further response from Iran. It needs to deliver a level of attack, in my view, that really does deter Iran from doing the same thing.
And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Because, of course, I mean, this scale of this attack by Iran, or directly from Iran on Israel, is unprecedented. The scale was huge. Again, it's a simple matter of, of chance and luck that we didn't see mass deaths if any of those missiles, ballistic missiles in particular, had got through. But of course, this was hugely disproportionate to the attack on Damascus, which killed just military targets among the Revolutionary Guard. And of course, bearing in mind, again, that was retaliation for the fact that Iran has been funding Houthi rebels, Hamas, and they're attacking on Israel. And of course, Hezbollah raining rockets down from Lebanon day in, day out in northern Israel as well. So again, we're into that tit for tat already. We're all the way long down there. If they did then go for, civilian targets as well as military targets, would that be acceptable, or should they stick to military targets only? Because one of the things I find fascinating is when I talk to people who've actually been in real wars, as opposed to armchair generals like myself, is people like you generally are the most wary of getting involved in wars, most wary of anything that could lead to an escalation, because you know the full horror and the reality of war in a way that us watching it on TV don't. So I'm intrigued to know what you think would be legitimate targets and what the risks would be.
I think it's one thing to be wary of, one thing to see the horrors of war and to understand how terrible it is to have a war and so therefore discourage it. It's another thing to misunderstand, I think, the way that the dynamics work and to believe that if you are proportionate and weak, then okay, people, that'll be the end of this round, but it won't be. It'll always be further rounds. There has to be, in many ways, overwhelming force. But certainly the Israelis should not, and I don't believe for one moment they would, carry out any attacks against the civilian population of Iran. It's obviously against the laws of war to do that. But also, we shouldn't forget that it's the civilian population of Iran that among which there is a huge opposition to the current regime in Tehran. And the last thing we would do, apart from the morality of it all and the legality of it all, is to alienate the civilian population. So the focus should be laser-like focus on Iranian military capabilities, military headquarters, military commanders, air bases, missile launch sites, some of the other infrastructure of Iran, which would do real damage to Iran, but certainly not kill innocent civilians. Of course, as we've seen in Gaza, when you do conduct military operations anywhere, there is always the risk of collateral damage. But I think particularly in this case, Israel should do all it can, as it has in Gaza, to minimize the loss of innocent life. And I've no doubt Israel will do that when it retaliates.
In terms of the Biden saying, take the win, in terms of the win also, there is a win diplomatically, or we've seen this waning of support among Western allies, specifically from America, and I would say also from, David Cameron, our foreign secretary as well, for the Israelis and their actions in Gaza against Hamas. And of course, we've all got concerns about the civilian population. But again, apparently we hold Israel to a higher standard than we hold our own British army even. But do you think actually having the US, the UK, and indeed, interestingly, Jordan step in to help Israel, that is a big diplomatic win for Israel, showing their enemies in Iran and other proxy fighters that actually, you know what, you can only mess with us so far, but we do actually have the biggest military might on our side. Is that at least something for Israel to walk away with?
I think it's a major and in some ways surprising element of this this whole incident, and it's extremely good. And I'm particularly proud of the Royal Air Force taking part in the operation. This operation, it's never done anything quite like this before. But also, I think it's notable that Jordan and perhaps other Arab armies took part in this operation as well, and that is an indication, I think, of the backing that Israel has from the Arab world. The Arab world, most Arab countries in the Middle East, are terrified of Iran. They want Israel to prevail over Iran, both over Iran, but also over Hamas in Gaza, which they recognise as an Iranian proxy and a threat to themselves. So I think that's very important. But one thing we should note as well, I believe, is that this is a pretty terrible thing to say, but I think it's true. The world likes it when Jews are attacked. They don't like Jews being attacked, but they sympathise with Jews and Israelis when they're attacked, and they tend to come to their aid, as they have in this case. But then very quickly, when Israel retaliates, the world somehow changes dramatically. So I'm not confident that when Israel does carry out whatever retaliation it carries out, they're going to see the same level of backing from Western armed forces and Western governments as they've seen. Let's not forget the 7th of October, massive support for Israel. Then, as soon as Israel started to fire back into Gaza, that didn't evaporate, but it very rapidly diminished. And we've seen the isolation that Israel faced over Gaza.
I think you share my disappointment in Western governments over their lily-livered attitude on this. Just finally, I want to ask you just very briefly about Ukraine. Look, as I say, you're a man who's been at the front, quite literally at the front end, dealing with wars. A lot of people are pointing out, well, hold on a minute. We went in to help, with America and France and other countries. We went in to help Israel, shooting down missiles and drones. Why can't we do that for the people of Ukraine? Why is it okay for Ukrainian civilians and children in particular to get killed by Russian drone and missile attacks? Yes, we're helping financially. A lot of aid still stuck in Congress in America, obviously. But we were slow to act early on. But at the end of the day, if we gave a hell of a lot more military hardware and aid to Ukraine, they could defeat the Russian forces. And we're not giving them that. Why aren't we?
Well, I agree with you entirely. I think it's a disgrace, the level of support that's been given. We've given a lot. Britain's given a lot in terms of financial aid, of weaponry, etc., intelligence, military expertise, military training, a great deal. And America obviously has given significantly more, and other European countries have contributed, but it's not anywhere near enough. What we've done is given them enough to fight the Russians, but not enough to defeat the Russians. And the reason for that, I think, is because particularly President Biden, who obviously leads pretty much any Western intervention anywhere in the world, is terrified of going too far, of provoking Russia. And of course, Russia's not going to be provoked into attacking the West. We've seen saber rattling from Putin. We've seen nuclear saber rattling. And every time he is given a red line and we've gone beyond it, the result's been zero. So I think there is too much fear of Russia, and that's played a major part in not throwing Ukraine quite to the wolves, but in not giving it all of the backing we certainly should have done.
Indeed. Richard Kemp, pleasure to talk to you. Colonel Richard Kemp, former British Army commander in Afghanistan, former chair of Cobra Intelligence Group as well. Thank you for joining us. Still with me is commentator Sam Armstrong. Interesting, another guest saying, going further than you, talking about, Israel should look at a disproportionate response, not proportionate. It should be, again, upping the ante, effectively, more than Iran upped the ante. But we know that Western allies, in inverted commas, will be criticising Israel if they do that. Colonel Richard Kemp is very clear. It should be military targets only. But that would be entirely justified. And it's the sort of thing that we in Britain, our allies, France and others, and the US would certainly do if this had happened to them. Why don't we think it's okay for Israel to do it?
Well, Colonel Kemp called it being slightly too fearful of Russia. I'll go further. I'll call it what it is. It is moral cowardice. It is don't rock the boat. President Biden, Rishi Sunak, I've got elections on this year. I can't have oil prices going up again because that'll send bills too high and I will be voted out.
Yeah.
And those
fear of Russia, fear of Iran, fear of China, fear of everybody.
Just don't rock the boat. And in the meantime, that gives the tactical, strategic advances to the likes of Russia and Iran in particular that are prepared to push the boat exactly how far they think they can get away with it. And that's how they've managed to basically take over Yemen.
Yeah. And exactly, it's the thing is, as you pointed out, it's kind of the opposite of warmongering. Again, we talk about this on the show all the time, speak softly, carrying a big stick. The knowledge of your enemies, that you are willing and able, crucial two things, willing and able to carry out, military attacks, to not just protect yourself, but to retaliate, is what stops people attacking you. Lots of people, and I love it when people call in, they say, they're talking basically, everyone should sit around and talk, and let's sit around. If we could only just sit round a fire and warm our hands, toast marshmallows, sing kumbaya, everyone would hug each other, and everything will be fine. No, the countries like Russia, will not stop. Countries like China will not stop. Countries like Iran will not stop. They hate Israel. They hate us. They hate West generally. They hate America. They hate everything we stand for. They want us all to die. I don't know why people think that's a negotiation starting point.
Look, there are evil people in this world, genuinely evil, and pretending that they are not does not help you, it helps them. And when they stand up and they say that they want to kill you, that they want to murder the West, that they want to destroy it, that they want to set up a new Russian empire, that when they want
to bring Iranian mullahs in charge of everything.
Iranian mullahs in charge of everything, or a new Chinese century, have the common sense to take them at their word. Yes, stop pretending that you're smarter and they say, oh yes, what they're really saying is they're trying to balance the reforms. No.
These were all the same people who, by the way, didn't think that they were completely surprised by Russia invading Ukraine, even after he built up 120,000 troops and tanks on the border and had given speeches saying Ukraine doesn't exist as an independent nation state. I don't know why they were surprised. I had it in my diary. Russia's going to invade this week or next week. Put it in the diary. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? There we are. Well, that's what we think. I'd love to know what you think. We are asking about Israel. They vowed revenge after Iran's missile and drone attack. Apparently, the only country not allowed revenge is Israel, apparently. World leaders have urged restraint. What is your reaction? Call us on 0344 499 1000, text 87222, or get in touch on X at Talk TV. Abby has done that and says Iran cannot be far from a nuclear weapon, and if that nuclear capability is not eliminated now, then parts of the Middle East are likely to end up as a nuclear wasteland. No doubt at all that Israel over the years, never confirmed by Israel, but have made sure that nuclear facilities don't kind of make it all the way deliberately because of this. Bernard says, name me any other country in the world that would be told it's OK, take it as a win if it had 300 missiles fired at it. And Richard says, Israel must send a message in return because doing nothing, it just looks weak. You've also been on the phones. Do keep those calls coming in. Let's go to Brendan, who is in Hartley-Brewer. Hello, Brendan.
Good morning again, Julie.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon. Late night. I love it when everyone's had a late night. Brendan, what do you want to say?
A couple of things. You were asking why we haven't done the same for Ukraine that we did for Israel last night. Our American and Jordanian fighters shot down Iranian missiles. We wouldn't do that to Russian missiles because they have missiles with big buckets of sunshine on the end of them, and he'd launched them. If we went into Ukraine and shot down Russian stuff, that's why the Russians are getting away with what they're doing with Ukraine.
What do you mean they've got big buckets of sunshine? What are you saying?
Sorry, I was a British Army colonel. We were fighting war games together, and he was telling me about they refer to big buckets of sunshine, nuclear weapons that explode.
Right, okay. I thought that's what you meant, but I wasn't sure, and I thought I might have misread it. So basically, you're saying, look, we're not willing to risk it with Russia, but Russia thinks they're at war with us already. I don't know why we don't just give them the war and get it over and done with.
Because that a war with Russia would end up we all dead. But they're getting what I originally rang you for was you're on about the Israelis in Iraq.
Yeah.
I think the Iranians are terribly silly to try and take on Israel because at the moment Israel tomorrow could turn Tehran into a sheet of glass with those big buckets of sunshine that they have. Because they definitely have 200 nuclear weapons, the Israelis. It's the last resort. They're never going to use them unless they're threatened by Iran setting up a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
That's why, hopefully, we don't let Iran get nuclear weapons. The Israelis stopped it about 20 years ago with a raid that was fantastically organised and put back their nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and again, never confirmed that it was Israel, but everyone knew. So, okay, what should Israel do? What should their response be, if anything?
Israel should start. They've got their own missiles that aren't nuclear tipped. They can take out, like you said, their airfields, destroy the air force. They haven't got much of an air force.
You think that would be a proportionate and reasonable response?
Yeah, well, that's apparently the Iranians launched down there the Israeli airfield. So, you go for military targets. And that's what they'll have to do to teach them a lesson. Because the Iranians aren't that good. There's lots of them, but they're a long way away from anywhere else, aren't they? They're in the middle of Asia, really.
But it's a very big country with an awful lot of military, and as we know, their proxies have been the main bane of Israel's life for goodness knows how long. Brendan, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much, Brendan in Hartlepool.